I stood by my husband Josh when he had to quit his job due to mental health struggles. I could never tell his mom, my toxic mother-in-law, that he had left his job. I tried to keep a brave face, thinking someone had to stay positive. I even tolerated the cruel words from my mother-in-law, who never liked me, just to protect Josh. But when I realized it was all for nothing, I was surprisingly calm. "Hello, mother-in-law? We need to talk." That call was the first and last one I'd ever make to her. I was done tolerating them. I decided to distance myself from my awful husband and mother-in-law. My name is Phyllis. I used to be a housewife, but I've returned to my previous job to support the family. The reason? Josh quit his job. I was shocked when I heard, but the cause was his mental health. He had been overwhelmed at work, and it took a toll on him. From a young age, his overbearing mother pushed him hard to excel in academics. He went to a prestigious university and landed a job at a major company. According to him, he felt outpaced by much more talented colleagues and couldn't handle the stress. This ongoing stress and exhaustion led him to break down mentally. I fully supported his decision to leave the job. I told him I would work and that he should focus on his recovery. But the problem isn't just his illness. Actually, I would support him through anything. That's not the issue. The real headache is my mother-in-law. She's incredibly proud of how well she raised her son. She loves comparing me and Josh and made a big deal out of me being a housewife for his sake. "The optics are bad if you both work. It looks like my son can't support you by himself." I had announced my plan to return to work as a family meeting. My mother-in-law didn't react kindly to it. Back then, I loved my job and took great pride in my work. So, becoming a housewife was not something I wanted. But my husband didn't want to go against his mother. So I reluctantly left my job to focus on our home. Returning to work now brings mixed feelings, guilt towards my husband and genuine happiness for myself. Of course, I want my husband to recover from his illness soon, but I'd also like to keep working even after he gets better. But working is a secret I'm keeping from my mother-in-law. She would never forgive her darling son for quitting his job. Since he's already quit, telling her wouldn't change anything. But forgiveness would not come easy. I can easily imagine her harsh words adding stress to my already mentally struggling husband. He'd been lectured until dawn when he received bad grades in school. If the next test score wasn't good, he was constantly nagged and complained at. "Are you not ashamed of these grades? You have no value in life. I shouldn't have given birth to you." He was raised with these kinds of constant insults. In modern terms, she would be what we call a toxic parent. Confronting her directly isn't an option. I have to keep this a secret no matter what. By the way, my father-in-law has passed away, and mother-in-law lives alone in her house. We're not living together, so she hasn't found out yet, but if she realizes I'm not home during the day, she's likely to take some action. Living with this anxiety, I've been working every day. 3 months into my secret employment, a message from my mother-in-law finally arrived. "Are you out gallivanting every day lately?" She didn't tell me how she knew, but she probably heard it from a neighbor. So I told her I was attending cooking classes. I thought this was paint me as a devoted wife, trying to better herself for her family and husband. But the mother-in-law was different. You're just a gold digger. You never did housework before, that's why you have to take a cooking class. It seemed like no matter what I said, mother-in-law would only respond with snide remarks. Your mom didn't prepare you for marriage, huh? Oh, right. She worked too. You were raised by a mom who couldn't even manage the household. I can tolerate being insulted, but I won't sit idly when she badmouths my parents. My mom balanced both work and housework just fine. Me taking cooking classes is entirely my own shortcoming. From the perspective of mother-in-laws everywhere, my comment probably lacked charm. But there are lines that just shouldn't be crossed. Needless to say, mother-in-law heated up even more and gave me an hour-long lecture. Since I was advancing my work on the computer, it wasn't too bad. Occasionally I got scolded for not reacting properly. But if I took everything she said to heart, I'd be the one losing it. I don't have time to feel down. Soon, mother-in-law started calling me more frequently. I've informed my workplace and got permission to take her calls. But honestly, it's a hassle. Also, I sometimes travel for work. Whenever I'm away, I tell her it's a business trip. Apparently, she doesn't approve of that either. Stop gallivanting with my son's money. You're supposed to be supporting him, not acting like a jobless housewife. I wanted to ask what more could I possibly do to support my husband, but I simply nodded. Arguing with someone like mother-in-law only wastes more time. Of course, I do argue when it's unbearable, but nodding and listening is quicker. I make sure my voice sounds like I'm seriously listening so she doesn't accuse me of being insincere. But the daily calls started to get to me, and stress began to pile up. After work, I came home and sighed as I sat on the living room sofa. I tried not to show my exhaustion in front of my husband, but at that moment, I didn't realize I really didn't have the energy to keep it together. My husband saw me and apologized with a regretful look. I'm sorry for leaving everything to you, Phyllis. Must be tough. Even though I didn't want to make him feel guilty, I shook my head vigorously. It's not your fault, Josh. I've told you, I'm fine with us both working. I'm not tired from work. It's just that my mother-in-law has been extra intense lately. I answered with a laugh, but if anyone knows how relentless my mother-in-law can be, it's my husband. He opened his laptop saying he'd look for a job soon. He knew from our last doctor's visit that I still needed counseling. I told him that there was no rush and that I wished he'd take things easy. Thank you. I'm so glad you're my wife, Phyllis. Seeing my husband smile for the first time in a while made me genuinely happy. Having him by my side gives me the strength to carry on. While marriage isn't everything, I felt thankful to be married to him. People might think my life looks tough, but supporting each other in times like this is what partners do. I was confident that he'd help me if I were in trouble. That faith remained unshaken. Still, the daily calls from my mother-in-law didn't stop, and her nagging seemed endless. Then, today, she made a comment that had me questioning what all the previous conflicts were about. Aren't you ashamed of being unemployed when you're married to such an outstanding son? Hearing those words, I was flabbergasted. Weren't you the one pressuring me to be a housewife? I wanted to say that, but decided to hear her out first. Apparently, she felt humiliated because a friend's daughter-in-law, whom she sees as a rival, has a thriving career. People are working women now. Being just a housewife is so outdated. When her friend said something like that, it seems my mother-in-law felt mocked. It's absurd how easily she changes her opinions, and honestly, it's frustrating. I pitied her for being so shallow. At the moment, I hesitated whether to confess that I was working. But given her personality, she'd argue no matter what I said. Plus, being honest about why I'm working probably wouldn't work either. I had planned to talk with my husband later to correct the mistake about me being unemployed. That day, I was so stunned by what my mother-in-law said that I went home without telling my husband when I would be back. On top of that, I came straight home from a client meeting, so I got home pretty early. As I walked into the entrance thinking dinner probably wasn't ready yet, I noticed a pair of unfamiliar women's shoes. A sinking feeling hit me right away. Could it be? No, not my husband. That's impossible. But then, as if mocking my thoughts, I heard my husband's voice and a woman's voice coming from our bedroom. "No word from my wife, so you can stay a bit longer. Oh, right. Want to go shopping for our date the day after tomorrow?" Standing in disbelief, I listened to their seemingly joyful conversation. What am I even doing? Why am I putting in all this effort? Oddly enough, I didn't feel angry or sad. Probably because my emotions hadn't caught up yet. Despite the alarms going off in my head, my body remained calm. I silenced my work phone and set it to video mode. Then, I discreetly positioned it in the entrance so it would capture their faces, making sure they wouldn't notice. Quietly, I left the house and locked the door behind me. I sat in a cafe a short distance away and texted him that I'd be home soon. He's probably frantically sending her home right now, I thought, surprisingly composed. Am I messed up? How can I stay so calm at a time like this? Did I ever really love him? I wonder why I was able to stay so calm. Maybe I should have gone into the bedroom where the husbands were at the time. Questions flooded my mind. And then, before I knew it, I was sobbing into my coffee at the cafe. People around me must have been startled. A woman past 30, crying quietly to herself. But I didn't care what anyone thought. I didn't have the luxury. What was this all about? What am I to my husband? It was truly, painfully sad. My heart ached so much. I wondered if anything could be more painful. About 30 minutes later, I stopped crying and, with shaking hands, called the psychiatric clinic my husband was supposed to be attending. I'd like to change the appointment date, I told the receptionist, giving them my husband's name. And sure enough, the response was exactly what I expected. He hadn't made any appointments. In fact, he hadn't been to the clinic since his initial visit. I came back home pretending nothing happened. My husband, looking guilty and downcast as always, welcomed me. He looked so happy just a while ago. I held back the words that almost slipped out. Heading to the bedroom to change, I checked the data on my work phone where I had secretly recorded him. His friend was in the footage. This guy is married too, I muttered, and for some reason I laughed. I then called my mother-in-law. I won't work anymore and I will never listen to you, I told her, cutting off the call. Within 15 minutes of me getting changed, the intercom buzzed. As annoying as it was that she showed up like clockwork, things were going just as I had hoped. My husband reluctantly answered the door, and a furious mother-in-law stormed in. "Jobless freeloaders out! I never accepted you as my daughter-in-law! Give me back my son!" Mother-in-law, inconsistent as always, was fuming. I showed her the video I had just recorded. "You see, my husband was having an affair at our home. Feel free to take him back. I'm planning on divorcing him anyway." My response seemed to please her more than it shocked her. "I'll overlook the affair. A divorce is excellent. Come on, Josh, let's go home." My husband, his arm grabbed by his mom, vanished from our home. He looked like he was about to cry, but honestly, the one who wanted to cry was me. Alone in the room, I broke down again. It was okay to cry my eyes out today. Otherwise, I felt like I would break. I might have initiated the divorce, but it's incredibly sad. Happy memories flooded my mind. Had I jumped to conclusions? But I couldn't take it anymore. How many times had he snuck her into our bedroom without my knowing? How much had I slept through it all? The more I thought about it, the more I was convinced that I had done the right thing. Before I knew it, it was morning. I took the day off. I didn't want to see my husband's stuff anymore, so I hurriedly packed his belongings and sent them to his parents. Immediately after, I contacted the property management and terminated the rental agreement. I couldn't live in a home where he had brought his mistress. The next week was a whirlwind of lawyer arrangements and compensation claims. I might have crumbled if I were alone, but I had the full support of my family, friends, and coworkers. I managed to keep going. Today's the day I get divorced from my husband. As I walk into the lawyer's office where we had agreed to meet, my husband and my mother-in-law are already there. As soon as I enter the room, my husband pleads, saying he doesn't want a divorce. My mother-in-law is in tears, waving a handkerchief and claiming that I've treated her horribly. "Phyllis, please don't leave my son. He can't live without you." Both my husband and mother-in-law look worn out, and I know exactly why. I've been receiving detailed updates from my husband about their life together. Initially, my mother-in-law was happy about the divorce, but it didn't take long for her to find out my husband is jobless. From then on, she's been berating him daily. However, it seems my husband reached his breaking point and finally raised his hand against her. Ever since, they've been hurling insults at each other day in and day out. All I could think upon hearing this is how glad I am that I left them. If they were trying to win my sympathy, my husband is surely a fool. "I've cut off ties with the woman I cheated with. You're all I have left, Phyllis." He's lied about being ill and cheated on me, even after losing his job. Turns out, he voluntarily quit his job after causing a substantial loss to a business partner. There's no reason anyone would need a husband who's such a pathological liar and betrayer. I state my opinion clearly, and both my husband and mother-in-law start bawling. "You have no right to cry. Just sign the divorce papers already. If you don't, I'll proceed with a mediated divorce." Hearing my cold words, my husband crumples the divorce papers he had been holding. I think to myself how pointless that is. Look at the lawyer and nod. "Let's go with the mediated divorce then. No amount of persuasion is going to change my mind." Deciding there's no point in further dialogue, I inform them that my lawyer will handle everything and stand up to leave. As I do, my husband latches onto my feet. "I don't want a divorce." I can't help but get a headache from this absurdity. An adult man acting like this. The office staff rushed over to my screaming husband and pulled him away. I left the law office right then and there. His cries still echoed down the hallway of the building, and I heard his mother berating him too. I felt truly relieved I had cut ties with them. Once again, I felt deep down in my heart that way. I filed for a mediated divorce and successfully divorced him 6 months later. Thanks to the infidelity compensation, I didn't have to give him a dime. He seemed to have incurred debts paying his affair partner's husband, too. Word has it, they both went their separate ways and never ended up together. His affair partner moved back to her family's home after being divorced. My ex-husband seemed to be mentally broken, mostly from daily mental abuse from his mom. As far as I'm concerned, it's bewildering that the one who cheated is the one falling apart. His mother contacted me several times asking to forgive her worthless son, but I blocked her. As long as he's dependent on his family, he'll never be independent. I hope they keep bickering for the rest of their lives. After the divorce, I threw myself even more into my job. Not wanting to think about anything else was probably the main reason. But as a result, I got promoted and now can do more of what I enjoy. I'm extremely grateful for my workplace and colleagues for taking me back after I had resigned. I plan to keep working hard to make it worth their while. And I vow to fully support those who helped me when I was down and betrayed.